baskets of fragments left over. They wanted to make a king. Who better to make a king than a walking, talking EBT card? Just touch him and you got a meal. Touch him, you'll be healed. Be near him, good things happen. That's the reason he was mobbed. They weren't listening to what he was telling them about the kingdom, at least not all of them will. That stuff didn't sink in until after the fact, after he was gone. And they began to remember.
I think a lot of the times they hadn't gotten baptized or endued with power from on high till Pentecost, but many times the disciples, apostles, were lacking in understanding spiritual things, like when he saw the Mount of Transfiguration. There was something spiritual going on there, and they wanted to build 3 earthly physical tabernacles. And he wasn't there for the earthly physical thing. He was here for something bigger, something greater. That's why it says time had come. My kingdom's not of here, he told Pilate.
Right.
If it was, my people would fight for me.
You don't
So-
know what you do.
Right. It was never. He was never really about the physical, but the disciples really didn't get it until they got baptized in the Holy Spirit.
That gives you a pretty good answer to that.
Yes, I thought that.
All right, anybody else have a question, comment on this part? But what about he sent, right after that, he sent the apostles out 2 by 2. Now, you always have to put these books together. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Each and every one of them will talk about a certain thing, but they each see it a little differently. And you have to really remember that some things, one of them will remember there, where another one did not think it was important. For instance, here, when he sent them out, he said they should take nothing their journey but the staff, not take anything else with them. But they also told them in Matthew, now don't go in to any other place. Don't go to the Samaritans. Don't go anyplace else. For I only came for the lost house of Israel. The lost people of the house of Israel. So Mark remembered that he told them not to take anything with them. Now, if you were to take off, say you decide, or you were sent up, go to South Georgia and preach the word. But don't take anything but one set of clothes, one shoe on each foot. Don't take no money. Don't take no food. Don't take anything. Just go on faith. That's what they were told. And we'll read here a little later how thrilled they were, how the Spirit really worked through that.
That reminds me of Abraham when Yahweh told him to leave everything he'd ever known, including his probably physical birthright and properties and everything else, to go to a land where he was going to send him that he'd never seen before, didn't even know if it ever actually existed except by faith. And he had to walk away from everything the same way the disciples did, go without anything, And so they had to go do the same thing, go out by faith, that these things weren't going to actually happen to them. And of course it did. They came back and testified. So.
Did you notice there, it says, who is this guy? This is that carpenter. We know his family. Here's his 4 brothers here. And his sisters. We know all them. What's this guy doing? He's going out here doing these marvelous things. Where'd this come from? Right? And they really never believed he couldn't do much there. What's that tell us about us? Does that tell us something about us, our life, where we're at?
Maybe that's why some of our family don't listen to us.
If Yeshua could not do much there because of unbelief, where does that leave us?
We just have to keep on tracking, just like you did.
We live in the middle of unbelief everywhere.
Exactly. Have our faith and strength.
They wonder why. Ask yourself the question sometimes. Why isn't things happening with us? You know? But if Joshua himself was hindered by unbelief, so are we. Great lesson, I think.
As she was saying,
That's
I come
why,
back
you
where
know-
I can find any faith on there.
It's why when he went in to raise this girl, he allowed the mom and dad to come in there. But he brought those three that he knew were strong in faith. Peter, James, and John. The same three he took up on the mount with him.
And the same three that Paul said were considered pillars of the church. The main.
Yes.
When Paul was traveling, he said he went up to Jerusalem to see the pillars of the church. He mentioned those three.
That's right. When he got up there, he said, he mentioned the same three in Galatians, John. And another place I was reading this morning, where he took three, the same three.
I got a question. When Paul went up to Jerusalem, didn't he see, wasn't James his brother, the brother of the Messiah? Wasn't that James' brother?
Yes, it was, as a matter of fact.
That's what I thought.
Yes, as a matter of fact, that was James, his brother, because James, the son of Zebedee, had been killed.
Already killed.
You're right. Okay. Anybody else got anything to say about the court? Okay. What about Herod? Herod knew he was a righteous man. He knew he was a holy man. He was afraid of it even. He only arrested and took him in because of his wife. She hated John. John went around telling everybody, she's a whore. She's a harlot. She didn't like him.
Yeah.
She's out there living with her husband's brother. And back there in those days, that was just same as saying you're a whore. And he was broadcasting. He didn't just say it to her. He said it to everybody.
And I think it's an example that we need to pay attention to with watching what we say,
Oh, definitely.
because
Well,
we can get ourselves in so
I
much
think
trouble.
he said that because he was meant to say it.
He would say
I
pagans.
agree, but
They're
I'm just
pagans.
saying, it's something that we need to
If it-
watch.
Right, if you paid attention.
Sometimes,
and
yes,
careful about
but
what you
when-
said, that.
when people are breaking the law, you don't need it. You need to tell
I agree.
And he went on ahead and did it because he was afraid of looking bad in front of everybody else,
them.
more so than killing him.
So he put him in prison,
Yeah. and then-
but he was afraid to do anything to it. As a matter of fact, another book says that he heard him. He heard him gladly heard him.
Must be an example of pride going before destruction, because when he was faced with that audience of people that heard what he said,
Right,
even though he reneged, and probably another case said, nah, we can't do that. He
He
just,
swore to her, in the half my kingdom, I'll give you whatever you said.
and he said it in front of a group of people, and he didn't want to look bad in front of that group of people and go back on it, so he just did it.
Her dance, Flynn, and his friend. It doesn't say how the dance was, but I can imagine, so can you. So, he had no choice in his mind, just like she said,
I'd like to say something.
yeah,
It's the classical example of how a person should be careful what comes out of their mouth. He promised her whatever she wanted up to half of his kingdom. And he made this promise. It's just like the man in Judges, just like the man there in Judges who said, whatever comes running out of, it comes from the doors of my house, I'll sacrifice. So it's a classic example of how a person should be careful what they say.
true, I mistook what Sister Barbara was saying there a while ago. That's exactly what she was talking about. I thought she was talking about John. For what he said, so, yeah, yes, she's right. David,
Had he had been a righteous king full of wisdom, he could have got out of it. He could have said, you know, a righteous man worth far more than many kings.
Right.
So, I mean, there's a way out, but he didn't have the Holy Spirit. He didn't have any righteousness in him. He was a king, an earthly king, a fleshly king.
he could have said to her, well, honey, this is more than half the kingdom.
Absolutely, that's my
I'll give
point.
you half the kingdom,
That's my
but I
point.
can't do this.
Right, that's the
Can't
point.
take a life.
Right.
Yeah, a man's life's worth more than a kingdom. Something wise like that would have been
I'd
awesome.
like to say that
Okay,
I
Steve,
don't
Tim?
think that Yahshua would forgive him for that, because I mean, it really broke his heart, and that was his cousin. And it was truly more than half the key, Yahshua's forgiveness.
Thanks, so.
I think so.
Just because it was his cousin. That didn't carry as
More
much
than
as,
just that.
yeah, it was more than just that, because John had a role to play before Yeshua. And he did that, and he did it unto Yahweh.
Well, he said of men that's been born of woman, there's none been never greater than John the Baptist. So
Exactly,
that came out of Yeshua's own mouth.
that's right.
That includes Moses and Noah and anyone you can think of. So.
All right, let's go on. So. Now, in verse 30, and the apostles gathered themselves together unto Yeshua and told him all things, what they had done and what they had taught. They had come back from their trip. They got back from their trip where he sent them out.
I wonder how much time lapsed.
Huh?
I wonder how much time lapsed.
She wondered how long it took them.
It doesn't say. We
I
have,
know.
but it's quite a big distance when you're on foot.
Right.
They didn't go out and get the Mercedes
Or a horse.
and drive out to the airport and get in their private jet and go, like many of the preachers